Welcome to the Better Than Bitter podcast, episode number 4. Today we have Jeff Wenzler. I am so excited for you all to be able to connect with him. He has degrees from Marquette University and Boston College. He is a motivational speaker, award-winning author of the book, The Pivotal Life, a compass for discovering purpose, passion, and perspective. And he is a resilience mentor, an international servant and leadership organization, an executive producer for the $10 Perspective, a humanitarian, a wannabe photographer, an avid hiker, a dad of 3 teenagers, and a dog rescuer. He has been amicably divorced for 10 years, and the way that he describes his life now is that he is playing zone defense with his 3 teenagers. So currently he's teaching at a high school. He teaches social justice in this urban school in Milwaukee, where the zip code has the highest level of incarcerations. And when he is not teaching, he is frequenting his 12 by 12 home in the Jamaica landfill community, where a lot of where he mentors single mothers and their children in just crazy, extreme poverty. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you.
Well, good. So I have spent in the last couple of weeks reading your book, The Pivotal Life. And I have to say that it was such an amazing read, but also just you have such an amazing story to tell. And the way that you have pivoted your life just really can showcase what is possible when you believe that there is no hope in your life. And a lot of people that are getting divorced, they just can't see tomorrow, right? Their life just feels like it's shattered. All of their dreams for what they thought their life was going to be is now going to have to change. And it's really hard to pivot with positivity. And so I just wanted to kind of reflect on kind of the messages that you have in your book and wanted to I'm looking down because I've taken such crazy notes. And I just wanted you to talk to me a little bit about the beginning stages of where you began your journey in these life pivots and how you were able to apply all of these different skills around resilience to your own divorce and your own journey and being able to share that with our audience.
So when I was 5, just kidding. So, um, I think at every one of the crossroads that I've come encounter with, and decisions to be made, discernment, asking myself, what's my role? Asking myself, is it worth it? All those different things. A lot of it does come back from a very emotional moment in my life where it just happened to be that on my 20th birthday, my 25-year-old brother died in my arms. And that just shocked me, right? That just shocked me to my core. And I share that because sometimes when other things happen to you in your life, it can trigger things, right? Not like PTSD, but it really, you can go back and all of a sudden you realize, gosh, Jeff, I got through something really big in my life, right? And, divorce is one of those moments where you question a lot of things, right? And it is loss, right? Life is just a series of losses. And in one sense, I can say that, it beat me down and I triumphed, I overcame that and I found ways to deal with that. And that gave me hope. You used the word hope. And I think gratitude and hope and perspective are huge words in my life. But you think that you go through something, you get through it one time, and that's it, right? Like, I've beaten this, I've gotten through cancer, I've gotten through divorce, or I've gotten through addiction, whatever the things that life throws your way, it's just constant learning, right? And I think that although that moment in my life really gave me perspective on what's really important and purpose, right? That made me who I am, and it helped me develop businesses and really meet incredible people around the world. And I'm sure that those kind of things play a role in people being attracted to you, just based on just, storytelling who doesn't want to be around somebody who is preaching purpose and really, I love to tell stories. That's the Irish side in me. But, the thing is that those waves, right? Those waves that hit you in life, they just kind of keep pummeling you. And I don't think in the moment you realize that. So you get caught up in that moment, just trying to catch your breath, that you don't really, remember how to swim. And if you're able to look back and realize, wow, I did figure this out before, and there is a path. Maybe it's not the same path, but I like to say, and using the kind of the beach metaphor, is, there's a lot of people, by whatever circumstances, they like the beach, they hang out and they're watching everyone else, surfing and boating, and say, oh, I'll get into the water eventually. And for those people who step out of their comfort zone and they get into the currents, a wave pummels them. And, all of a sudden maybe it's exhilarating at first, right? And some of us have, and I do have, the dopamine rush of risk and that type of thing. And, throw yourself in head first and say, wow, that was awesome. What a ride. And then, as you're catching your breath, boom, you get hit again, right? And sometimes you have to go with that current, and you have to have trust that, it's not the same path back, right? So I can sit here, I'm 51 years old, and I've been divorced for, 10 years now. And I was married for 12 years. I have 3 teenagers, as you said. And, I do have to remind myself that I've come a long way, but I think when you get that perspective, you realize, wow, there's going to be another wave coming, and it could be friends and family. You just collect more people with more revolutions around the sun. And I've been blessed to have incredible relationships in my life with, I have a sister, my daughter is my oldest, and she's now a young adult. And then, my mom and just those 3 women, right? Along with now an ex-wife that I co-parent with, and relationships that I've navigated since. So I try to always remind myself that, I don't want to live in the future too much, right? I think that, regret, ruminating over things, beating yourself up, that lives in the past. And, and the future is anxiety and is fear. And we give those 2 things too much power. This moment is the only thing we control, the only thing. And every one of these pivotal moments have taught me that lesson, or bring me back, right? That's my lighthouse, is to realize that, Jeff, get out of your head. The world, the sky's not falling. Life is fragile, it's precious, but that's all we have.
Yeah. I think that so I actually just built a whole course around fear, and how fear kind of sits at the core of almost all of our emotions. It's just about like what that like headed goddess is going to appear as today. And one of the things that Tara Brock, who is one of my mindful coaches, she talks about riding the waves as well. And she talks about the fact that it's not that the waves are going to stop rolling. It's just that you need to learn how to ride them.
Absolutely.
And that is fear. It's about learning how to ride those waves, not avoiding them, don't not get in the water, don't buffer, don't, utilize all those other avoidance techniques like overeating, over drinking, over scrolling, over spending, all of those buffering techniques that we do so easily when we are in fear, even though fear might come out at us as different emotions, anger, resentment, disappointment, whatever, anxiety. But really, it's about learning how to ride those waves and moving through your fear. And so just as you're telling your story about like how you pivot in your life and how you are able to say, okay, yeah, this is a wave that's crashed on top of me, and I can decide to get out of the water and never get back in, or I can decide to stay in that water and make choices in my life on how I want my future to look like. Like you said, you want
Absolutely.
to live in the present. You don't want to live too much into the future, but you
Right.
don't want to live in the past, right?
Right.
So you also talk a lot in your book about humility and how, the humility really allowed you or allows you to rise above that pride. So can you talk to me a little bit about humility and how humility really played a role in the healing around your divorce, and how you can share
Mhm.
some of what you experienced, with the audience to give them some lessons or exercises or teachings around humility and healing.
Absolutely. And you said, I think a good place to start is the word you used afterwards is pride. So pride can, get us to excel, right? And especially, I can only speak from my perspective and as a male perspective, is that pride going all the way back to the first pitch in Little League was something that it fueled me, and it really motivated me to be good at things, right? Sometimes to take control. I don't consider myself really a control freak, but definitely things can get out of control when you think you have it all figured out. Um, so, you know, pride and ego to me are kind of synonymous. And I've realized so much that our ego is the thing that, just constantly is getting in my way. So when after 9 years, probably by that time, 9 years of marriage, my ex-wife, so wife at the time, she said, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And that is a chasm between pride and utter, faced with fear and vulnerability and so much of that. That's a tough pill to swallow. I'm happy to be able to say that I immediately took ownership because I'm a fixer, and I wanted to be able to self correct that, right? I wanted to harness the wind, so to speak, using that metaphor that we were both using, and that, you know, my world was crashing down, and I just wanted to be able to take ownership. And I did look at myself. I thought I was broken and that I did that. And I say that because I still cared. And so I wanted to salvage. I wanted to, self correct. So at that moment, it was bent knee and go to my own doctor, and didn't even know what to ask. I just said, what did I must be broken. There must be something about my personality. It's like, give me a pill to, a chill pill, so to speak. Right. And I was willing to, literally do anything. So when she mentioned counseling, that was a no brainer for me. And after being single on and off, mostly off over, 10 years since divorce, I will say that the pattern I've picked up from many single women that I've met that are divorcees, that they do not, or they said that their former, spouse refused to go to counseling. And if there's one massive piece of advice that really moves you from pride and ego into more vulnerability and humility, is definitely being able to kind of put up a white flag and say, I don't have it all figured out, that
Yeah.
there could be another perspective here. There is a whole nother human being, whether it's, whatever you're dealing with in life, that there's a whole nother human being or human beings that have their own perspectives. So I was grateful that very quickly I said, yes, like, let's go and let's meet with somebody. Um, so that I think was, one of the more humbling moments. I mean, I mentioned about my brother's death and the fashion that he passed away. That was humbling, and that was on a different plane than the person that you had looked across and, an altar and said, till death do us part. And um, so that was a starting point, and that was a part of healing, and we can get into that. But that definitely was the birthplace of humility and a death place of pride, because I was not proud of that person I promised so much for and to take care of, right, to protect, and I
So
obviously wasn't doing a good job.
one of the things that, so I do coach actually a lot of men, and I realize a pattern in terms of things that they think when they're getting divorced. And a lot of what I hear is failure. And that because the vows by which we say, till death do us part, and that if you don't reach that, commitment, that you believe that you've a failure. And you said, like you just told me, I, said I was going to be a provider or a protector, or a partner. And yet, it still didn't work out that way. And there's a level of ego and pride that's associated with that thought that I've failed. And something in your book kind of really hit me around, you talked about being the best at, and you had a lot of different things that you said, that you wanted to be the best at. And I believe that what are your thoughts about if you put yourself in a place where you believe and you think that you have to be the best at all of these things, doesn't that set you up for failure? If that's the way your
Absolutely.
mindset, yeah.
Yep.
So it's a mindset thing. So, you know, rethinking about like, why do I need to be the best at that?
Mhm.
Why do I need to be the best at that? Like, why do we put ourselves in a position by which we're setting ourselves up for failure? Part of my job as a divorce coach is I try to shift people's thinking about the fact that you can't control what your wife's needs were. And you are two human beings that are showing up and evolving as humans. And
Mhm.
just because you're getting divorced doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that both of you are now pivoting to having more personal growth and self discovery, right? So, post divorce, you can tell me, like post divorce, how much growth actually has happened in you since in the last 10 years?
Incredible amount, absolutely incredible amount, because that, it goes back to humility, and that I've learned that weakness is your greatest strength. And a lot of people don't, especially men, don't want to hear the weakness part, because what propels us to be successful and maybe to be an attractive partner to somebody in the beginning is you're good at things, whatever it is, whether it's telling a joke or good at friendships and making people laugh, or at your job or sports. And I had a bunch of successes in life, but once humbled, then you realize, like, what is best. Yeah, I definitely find myself just catching myself. That is this a mountain I want to die on, right? So they say a happy wife is a happy life, right? A happy ex-wife is a happy life. So
It is.
that's what
It
I'm
is.
learning. And that's what I'm learning. Not an easy path to get to all the time. And also back to the wave thing, is it comes and it goes. And hopefully it goes more than it comes your way. And then realizing that I play a part in it. So by going to counseling, marital counseling, and then doing co-parenting counseling, keeping the kids first. That was really huge. And then you get to a point where I'm not the best dad, but I'm a darn good one. And I try not to compare myself to other people. But if I'm in the flow, right? That word flow. I've
I
learned so much about that in the last 10 years too, right? So, some people just know it as being in the zone, right? It's like, how can you shoot a free throw when the championship's on the line and you have 50,000 people screaming at you? Half want you to make it, and the other half, want you to mess up. Um, so I think that, I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts going through my mind. So I know that that humility, that, and I know I use the word weakness, and maybe I'll come up with a better one, but being able to recognize that I am not in control of everything, and knowing that life is about relationships, whether it be a wife, whether it be a partner, whether it be an ex-wife, whether it be my manager. So I'm learning lots of forms of communication. So, I mean, this podcast could be 5 hours long, because there's so many buzzwords, but they are so true. Being able to connect with that emotional side of myself, has allowed me to write the book and be very, very detailed about, as you know, about things I went through, thoughts going through my head. I continue to write. So I write, with thoughts going through other characters' heads. So empathy, right? Trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who might live in a garbage dump in a third world country, or teenagers that would be at my side that I take there. So empathy, communication, humility. When somebody welcomes you into their personal space, if it's a podcast, if it's a relationship or any form of relationship, romantic or otherwise, that's an incredible moment to be in. And my kids have allowed me to. I've done well. They're turning into wonderful human beings.
Yes, isn't that so great? I always say that, like, is the way that our children treat us is not an indicator of our influence on them. It's how they
Mm,
treat others when they go out into the world,
I like
and
that.
how they treat other people. And you see them showing up as as themselves outside of the home. Like, our kids can like get mad because we didn't make their pasta right or whatever, but they go into somebody else's home and they would never tell the person that they're a guest at their house that they cooked their pasta wrong, right? So you've done something, even though
Right.
they might not treat you that with that same respect every day. I definitely think that we all hope that we can do right for our children. And I love the fact that you and your ex have really focused on the children, and that you did co-parenting coaching, which I want to ask you about. In my previous episode, I actually had interviewed a co-parenting coach. And I think that everything that we do at Better Than Bitter is all about child-centered divorces. And I've had guests on that have been adult children of amicable divorces, because I'm super curious about what your kids are going to say when they're in their 30s, and the fact that we were able to maintain this amicable relationship with our exes, and what a gift we were giving to them, because they don't deserve to be in the line of fire. So tell me a little bit more about that co-parenting coach experience for you, and how it really guided you and your ex to have this productive, collaborative, cooperative relationship.
Yeah. We went through counseling with a marital counselor, and when it got to the point where we both agreed that this was a season and now it's time to move on, we had put in the work, we had put in the thoughts and the discussions and the tears, and then we looked to the counselor, and she was very experienced and said, I would be more than willing to talk to you about now what's the next step. And obviously, that there's just so much transition, right, on so many different levels as you go through a divorce. And at first, just the separation period. What are you going to tell the kids? Where are you going to live? How are you going to break up the time with the kids and finances and everything? And then looking at your job, and can you be a single parent even if it's 50% of the time? You're still, providing so many of the same things. So you're looking at so many of that. But I'll tell you that what it came down to is another human being that we respected, right? That had empathy, but that was trained, that had experience, and simply looked at us and said, well, what do you want for the kids? And we both said, we want them to be our priority. Our schedules aren't our priority. Our living arrangements. I mean, everything has to have a core to grow from. And that was, we're going to keep our kids a priority in everything. And that was a huge move right there. And I think everything comes from that. Now, not easy sharing something, personal, but I think, important because it leads to, again, that transition and humility that is riddled in there. So I move into a house, and at first, when we decided actually to get to tell the kids that indeed we are getting mommy and daddy are going to be friends, that we're gonna but we're not going to be living together, and life's changing. They were young at the time; they were 10 or 9, 7, and 5. We had kind of gotten through that piece, and once we crossed that, it was like we became friends. My soon to be ex-wife. I mean, it was like this thing that was lifted off of us. Now that's before lawyers got involved. So there's, there's
Yeah.
bumps in the road, but that was, that was relieving that core was there, that respect and a different form of love, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you be in love with somebody in one fashion, but not in another? And over the years, I think we've figured that piece out. But when we actually went house shopping together, people thought we were a young couple looking for houses. She painted the rooms of the house, the kids' rooms, and I mean, it was an interesting time. But there was a moment, and again, that one wave comes in and the other wave goes out, and back and forth. There was dust settling in my house from some construction work just to get the house ready and whatnot. And I saw on this wooden table where the dust had all settled, there was one of the kids had drawn stick figures of mommy, daddy, and the kids, holding hands. And then there was a note that was just left, not to be seen, but just a note. Now, 9, 7, and 5. And that note said, I hate this house,
Hmm.
and it's all mommy and daddy's fault.
Hi, everyone. It's Tania here. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Better Than Bitter podcast. I really appreciate everybody supporting our mission to help change the divorce dialogue. So if you are interested in subscribing, that would be great. The more people that subscribe, the better we will be able to produce content that's meaningful to you. And in appreciation for people who subscribe, we have lots of different special offers at Better Than Bitter. One of them is that you get an opportunity to participate in a free group support trial. We have a support group membership plus, which means that you not only get weekly support groups, but in addition to that, you get access to a resource library of articles, webinars, workshops, and so much more. By subscribing, we want to give you the benefit of jumping into one of our support groups and trying it out. One of the other benefits is that you can participate in a one-to-one free consultation with me. So if you are going through divorce, if you're at the beginning stages, maybe you're in the thick of it, or maybe you're post-divorce and just wondering how to get back into life, start dating, building healthier relationships, all of those are things that we can talk about in our one-to-one consultation. So again, go ahead, subscribe to our channel and participate in one of our free offers. And I look forward to engaging with each and every one of you so you can be better than bitter.
I don't know if there's too many other things that are above that on the list of humility. When you love your kids, you want to give them everything, and you're positioned to give them such wonderful things. But that was very difficult. The good thing is I didn't harbor any, ill will. It was
Yeah.
at that point the counselor had helped us on multiple levels, kind of look at our situation and still allow us to bitch a little bit, right? I mean, that's definitely a part of it as well. So that counselor, we did that for a while. I'm not sure how long she continued to, because some of it was together and some of it, when you're talking about co-parenting, it doesn't always have to be with that person, sitting in front of you.
Yeah, sure. It's the challenges of all of a sudden being a single parent. It's overwhelming when you haven't had to do everything and all of a sudden you have to do everything, whether you're the man or the woman. And
Mhm.
that's definitely overwhelming. I know that you talk about the fact that you have this relationship with your ex-wife, and it is still a partnership. It's just a
Mhm.
partnership, a new one, right? And the co-parenting coach that I had on the last podcast, she talked about the most difficult thing for people to really do when they move into co-parenting is to separate the past partnership with the parenting, because the way that your ex showed up in the marriage was one type of partnership, right? And that if you can't separate that out and let that go and allow for the new relationship to take place where it is a different partnership, and the partnership is around parenting, right? So,
Mhm.
and it really does change people's perspective in terms of, okay, yeah, like I got to leave all that behind, and I have to reestablish a different partnership around parenting, because that is what is going to connect us, right? There's nothing else that is really connecting us other than this really important new job that we have, and that is to have a family reimagined. I told my kids, when we were separating, and it was like you said, it's like, God, probably the worst day of my entire life is having to share that information
Mhm.
to little faces and how to say it. And we said it very similarly. Mom and dad are still love each other. We're just not in love with each
Mhm.
other, and we're not
Absolutely.
gonna like live together. And the idea around what you said, about, we're still a family. And I said to our kids, like, hey, we're really committed to this family. It's just going to be a family reimagined. And my daughter was 17 at the time, and she starts to laugh. She was like, oh my God, mom, like whatever, like family
Yeah.
reimagined. But if you were to ask my kids today, you know, years later, what is it? What do you think this is? They absolutely would say, yeah, this is a family reimagined. Like, we are still a family. It's just a different one, you know, than we
Yeah.
started.
Yeah,
Uh,
I suppose I'm gonna throw some questions your way.
sure.
So, sometimes I feel blessed that, haven't had to deal with some of the obstacles that I hear that are out there. So what do you do? It sounds like in your case, in my case, we took the high road and said, we still love each other. And, but when there's a lot of infidelity out there, there's a lot of hurt and betrayal. And, when somebody, you know, they want what's best for their kids, but they don't, like they're harboring ill will, at that critical moment of divorce. How do they prioritize the kids in those situations? Or if you have a child that, you know, I've heard before where, some kids really are let in. I mean, if they're older too, they're let into the why there's the divorce, right? Younger kids might not want to know as much as another age. So, when you have one partner that is still, beat up and, hurt and angry, and then you have kids that might know and side with one parent, that probably a little bit tougher in those situations. I mean, what have you learned from that?
Yeah. So a lot of so people, when they decide that they're getting divorced, a lot of people rush very quickly into a legal process. And it's very important that we process our emotional divorce before we move into our legal divorce, because the legal divorce then becomes an emotional
Mm, well
disaster,
said.
right? So we really do focus, individuals that have had some sort of maybe event that might be infidelity, or maybe it's been something, they just feel wronged.
Hmm.
We get them to a place by which they can throw away the why. Because once you make the decision that you're getting divorced, the why actually doesn't matter anymore. And most states are no fault states. So that's not going to be brought up in court. It's not going to get you anything more if your, ex-wife had an affair. But I deal with a lot of individuals that are having that anger, the resentment, the disappointment, the disbelief, and they are emotionally in a place of grieving. And so moving through your grieving process is very important, and getting to a place of forgiveness, and not forgiveness of the other person for an act that they did, because you don't need to do that, but you need to forgive yourself for allowing that bitterness and resentment to rule your world, right? So just getting to a place of acceptance to say, okay, this is what it is. If someone made a decision that you couldn't control, the only thing that you can control is your actions, behaviors, and reactions, right? You cannot control other people. And if you keep your focus on what result you want in your life, bless you. So what is the result that you want in your life, right? So it's like, if you know that outcome, do you want to live a life post-divorce, bitter, angry, resentment? Do you want to hold on to that to affect the second or the next chapter of your life? Nobody wants to live that way long term, right? So what's the best way of healing yourself to allow yourself to get to a place of acceptance? When you move into your legal negotiation, you're ready to negotiate a business contract. And I talk to individuals, it's like, this is the most difficult business contract that you'll ever negotiate, but it is a business negotiation. When you're in a company and you're negotiating a contract, there's going to be so much discomfort if you're trying to fight for things that are important and you prioritize like what you're willing to have concessions on and not. That's a divorce contract, and it doesn't feel good. Like you said, like, until the legal people got involved, we were kind of like in a happy place. And then the lawyers got involved and it was like, ugh, and so like, yeah, it's not going to feel good. I'm not saying amicable divorces are all warm and fuzzy. The legal process is going to be hard, but it's a business negotiation. And if you have process and you've gotten to a place where you believe that you have courage and hope and believe in your next chapter, when you step in and you stop blaming, I talk about victors and victims. If you're walking into a legal negotiation and you're stuck in this victim mentality where you're blaming and you're having excuses and denial around, your role in where you are or what you believe, the best thing that you said to me, you're like, I took responsibility. I took accountability, right? It's so easy to blame other people for a marriage that doesn't work out. Oh, it's their fault. They didn't do this, or they didn't do that, or they didn't show up this way. Therefore, it just didn't work out. Well, that's a victim mentality. Life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you. And if you move into your divorce thinking like, oh God, like, okay, this isn't happening to me. This is happening for me. This is the pivotal life moment. I have an opportunity to. And, even Tara Brock talks about that with fear. She's like, you can either run around fear and avoid it, or you can try to move through that fear where there's this big red button. And every time you do it, you push it and it means time to grow. And I just love that visual. I love that visual of that big red button. And I'm like, I'm going to push through this. I'm going to push this button. I'm going to move through this fear, because if you do, not only is the legal negotiation going to go more smoothly if you can throw away the why, you can manifest your desired outcome, know the results that you want for yourself and for your children. Nobody says, I want to get divorced and have a horrible co-parenting relationship with my ex. I mean, who says that? Nobody hopes for that.
Oh, they
You have
just can't see through their
just
own bitterness at that point in time. You had said about how did you say that? That was the button?
the red
The
button.
the
Time
red
to
button.
grow.
Right as soon as you said that, is funny because the image that went through my mind is I needed a shock collar at first. A red button. It was a shock collar, right?
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sure some people could say that they want to put that on their, uh, their
Yes.
partner. But I mean, I'm at a point where it's like, man, I need that for myself, once in a while. I mean, for real, like, is something as simple as texting somebody was just, for me, dangerous. And in the workplace, they even say that about emails, right?
Yes.
There's nothing worse than something being taken out of context,
Yeah.
right? And, I'm an over communicator. So, somebody doesn't need to get paragraphs and paragraphs in a text, where it says more or whatever, at the text. That's a long text when you have to actually press the button because you can't even scroll. And
I don't
it's
know
like,
if I've ever gotten a text like
oh
that.
my
So
gosh. Well,
long.
hey, we're friends now, right? So
Text
you'll,
me the 2 paragraphs
you'll
or the
see.
5 paragraphs.
But,
Um,
text and communication is just, it's massive. So I love how you said actually about how you said that, it's don't rush into the legal part until the emotional part is at least you're on that path to addressing that, and that it really is a contract. It's a partnership. So, I mean, it's, you have a job to get done. I hate saying that that's kind of, how it is, like treating it like it's a contract at work, like an employment agreement, but it really is, right?
really is.
Yeah, I
It
don't think I figured that out at first. So those texts, those texts, you just realize that it's so easy to just fire off a statement or whatever, and there's just no context. And for us, to this day, to be totally honest, it is, it's not hard to trigger some animosity with a person who is making major decisions about human beings that you love and care dearly about. There's
yeah.
no doubt that that can set you back. But when I really take a big step back and I look at when I'm in the room with a boss that I don't necessarily see eye to eye on an issue with, or a colleague, or my own children, or my ex, when I'm in the same physical space, empathy. I mean, if you're a good person, at one point, you guys, you were lockstep together, and when you're in, if you're a respectful human being, you're looking at the person, you're picking up on body language and things like that, right? But you don't
Yep.
get any of that in text.
No, and there's actually a really, really great app out there now. It wasn't there when you got divorced, but it's called Our Family Wizard. And I encourage everybody who is struggling to, really figure out the whole texting communication thing. So Our Family Wizard is a platform by which you can put all of your parenting time in, and it has a text platform and it has a lot of other bells and whistles. But if the tone of the text is something that is not a supportive tone or derogatory, maybe it's, passive
Hmm.
aggressive, it fixes it for you
Wow,
before it gets sent out.
that's pretty cool.
And it
And you would
also,
think with AI, it's just going to keep getting better, right?
going to keep getting better. So it alerts you like, hey, this isn't so productive. Like this is a better way of saying it. But it also keeps track of all of that. So if there is any other issues down the line that you need reference back to communication, or if something's not working, and that it's all noted. So in some cases, I do believe that courts will require individuals to use the app. So there are a lot of tools out there. And by the way, this is not a sponsored pitch on Our Family Wizard. I just really do believe that it's a great platform if you're having issues. If you're dealing with somebody who you believe is a high conflict individual, being able to have something like that to help. And there's a lot of different techniques that we go through in my 5-step game plan course about communicating with high conflict individuals. And it's really amazing. People who I coach are like, well, I just don't know. I just don't know if that can work. I'm like, try it. Try it, try it, try it.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
the
I mean,
way
it sounds like it's a great tool to have in the tool belt. And then that takes you back to also having another tool, and that is a professional, right? A
yes,
professional counselor, coach, somebody who, I can already tell in a short period of time, we've talked once before this, that, you know, every counselor or coach has a different, I guess a different vibe, right? And a dynamic. But when it clicks, then if I had an issue that was big that was coming up that I wanted to, talk to you about, I mean, I can come to you, I'm guessing, and throw that scenario. And you can be like, Jeff, like dial it back a little bit. All this other stuff isn't as important as what is the issue that you really want to express? What's your goal out of this? I'm not giving a plug for you,
no,
but
I know it.
but I
I
am, because like I'm already thinking in this short period of time, I'm already thinking about, I got into another relationship a lot sooner than she did. And that set us back. We were not dancing through the daisies, but things were pretty well. And I I moved on a little bit quicker than her, a lot quicker. And sure wish I had somebody like you to, process that a little bit, just to get another perspective instead of the bulldozing. Like, if you're throwing me to the side, I can go and do what I want to do. Right. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I'm a nicer person than that, but I can understand now looking back that, probably came across that way. Right. And then it's like, how are you keeping the kids at the forefront when it can come across as, that's very selfish behavior.
Yeah. And I think that, kids, when I always veer on the side of caution in terms of when you bring new people into your lives, how you introduce the children, depending on the ages of the children, and if they're ready. I always
Mhm.
say, make sure you're checking in with your kids, making sure that, do they want to meet somebody else? Because you can keep it private when you don't have them full time. The kids don't always necessarily have to meet people
Mhm.
unless like it is something you believe is going to be something that might be long term. Don't have a revolving door. Don't feel like you need to introduce your kids to every person you're dating. You do not.
Mhm.
I mean, they don't have to be subject to that. If it's a serious relationship, then make the proper introductions. If the kids are older, they don't really care who you date, you can kind of sense their warmth to that.
Mhm.
Maybe they just have a curiosity more than anything, but they just want you to be happy. That's also a whole other podcast. We could
You're
talk
right.
about dating.
Sign
Um,
me up.
I know, I know. Okay, so we've been talking for so long, and this has been such an incredible experience for me. And I am so just blessed to be able to talk with you today because, God, The Pivotal Life, everybody should read it. It's available on Amazon. Again, this is not a paid promotion. I'm just telling you, it's a really good book, and
Oh,
it
thank
is
you.
something that will change your life. I was telling Jeff that the Celestine Prophecy is one of those books that I, go back to all the time. And I feel like The Pivotal Life is going to be sitting right next to that one on my bedstand. So, Jeff, if there's any last comments you want to make to the audience, any reminders, any motivational words of wisdom as people are going to be coming in to listen to us who have either just started or maybe during or even after their divorce.
You started off by using the word, hope. That was early on in some of your comments. And I just really have to say that there is hope. I know that cliches exist for a reason, right? They get repeated over and over for generations because there's some truth to it. And we can't see beyond that moment, right? But the whole concept of a pivotal moment is that you have options and you have to ask yourself, what is it that you control? And from a guy's perspective, who wants to give away power that's unnecessary, right? I want to be empowered. I want to have power. I'm a guy. And again, that's probably not just a male thing, but men listening for sure would understand when I say, like, we want to regain power in our lives. And it doesn't always have to be an unhealthy thing. Recognizing that it's just a path. It is an actual journey. And that, it's a compass that you have to sometimes take a step back, calm the blank down, breathe, and then determine, you know, what do you want? What do you want to like imagine or reimagine? I say retreat. I write about it in some other stuff that I'm working on. It's retreat. It's recommit. Like, hey, I want this. I'm willing to commit. And then it's reimagine what is possible and what I want my future to be. I want it to be healthy. I want to be healthy and happy for my kids. I want to be in a successful relationship again, but I just want to live a life without anger and bitterness and just always looking backwards. And then you have to retool. And when you retool and work with somebody that it knows a little bit more or somebody who's gone through something, similar, You got to kind of tap into that wisdom, and then you got to kind of re-engage, and then it's one step back in. But really, I think that there's that knee-jerk reaction to just pounce and to jump. And I think that the first step needs to be, calm the bleep down and breathe and take that step back. And then it's kind of rinse and repeat, right?
Yeah.
And I will end with this, that, there was a Mother's Day weekend. I was out of the country, and I just decided to text my ex and just say, thanks for taking the kids and happy Mother's Day. And I just want you to know that I picked the best person to raise my kids. So I have come to a place where we are different people, and she's in a wonderful marriage, and I couldn't have picked a better man to, raise my kids and co-parent with. But to get to that place, there is hope that you can get to that. And that's it until the next wave hits. But hopefully not with her, and and just something else in life, and one step forward.
Well, Jeff, this has again been such a great conversation, and I'm definitely going to have you on as you publish your second book, and we can talk more about, your life journeys. And again, such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thanks.
Take care.